Hi, Mabel.
How's it going?
Oh, it's great. How are you doing?
Great, I got sparkly shoes.
Oh, you got some sparkly shoes? Oh, so good. Okay, so I've got some questions for you. What is your favorite chore?
I guess making my bed.
Making your bed?
Yeah.
What is your least favorite chore?
Swarming and folding clothes.
Yeah, I get that. What is something that you do to help make chores better?
Maybe sometimes get one toy to pretend that it helps me clean up.
I love that idea. So doing it with a friend.
Makes it funner.
Yeah, I love that. Welcome to Lightcatchers, a storytelling podcast for kids who can find the good in the bad, the beautiful in the ugly, and the light in the darkness. This season, we're following the adventures of Bob the Bad Pirate, a pirate who is not very good at being a pirate. So if you're ready, sit back, kick up your feet, and come catch the light with me. Far away, across the high seas on the furthest edge of the Caribbean, sailed the infamous Bob the Bad Pirate. Every day, when the dawn spread over the waters and the sailors rose from their quarters in the hull of the great wooden ship, Bob the Bad Pirate stood atop the mast and yelled, "Arg, 'tis a great day for pirating." Whenever Bob shouted this, the rest of the crew spat upon the deck and cheered. There was nothing more exciting to a crew of pirates than a day of pirating. And Bob and his crew loved to pirate.
Everybody now! So give us gold and give us silver, give us jewels to fill our souls. Give us every day a sliver of the beauty we behold, 'cause we are pirates through and through.
That's right, we are!
And we will be till we die, so give us treasure, sure and true, till we meet the by and by.
As Bob the Bad Pirate walked from his quarters to the deck, he was confronted with a few of the chores he'd been putting off the last few weeks. The empty barrels and trash were piled up in the corner of the ship. The cannons were dirty, the sails were wrinkly, and the deck needed a good polish. Zoe, the first mate, had been trying to schedule a day to address these things, but Bob was too interested in the fun pirate stuff and kept putting them off. However, now that the wind had slowed and the stink of the mess was hitting Bob's old nostrils, he decided today was the day for some good old pirate ship cleaning. Zoe was already at the helm with the checklist in her hand when Bob walked up. Polly the pigeon flew down to the pile of food scraps and began pecking at an old sandwich.
"Zoe,"
Bob said,
"I do believe we put it off long enough. I hate to disappoint you in your plans today, but I think it's high time we gave this ship a good old pirate cleaning."
Zoe looked up from her list excited. "Really? Do you really mean that?"
"I know you probably had other plans to maybe raid another ship, set sail for treasure, or have the crew compete in odd feats of strength. But I do believe it's time we attended to some of the less glamorous parts of pirating."
Zoe was smiling big. "Bob, I do enjoy all those things, but I don't really like doing them on a dirty ship. I think designating today a cleaning day is a great idea." Bob smiled as well.
"Arg, I guess that settles it."
Bob climbed up into the crow's nest to look down at the crew.
"Ahoy, me ragtag crew of buccaneers! 'Tis time we pirates attended to more domestic matters. There will be no adventures today, but the sun will not rest until this ship looks newer than the day we stole it."
The crew, who were also getting sick of the mess and the smell, were very happy to finally have a day to work on it all. They all shouted back. And with that, the day of cleaning began. And so did the singing. We may have bugs inside our ears and corn still stuck inside our teeth. We never clean behind our knees.
Why?
And please don't smell our stinky feet. We haven't washed our clothes since we set our feet upon the deck.
Why would we?
We're yucky and we're gross, there's still one thing we respect.
Clean ship, we all love a clean ship. Clean ship, sailing through the seas.
We wash the sails.
We wax the hull.
We pick up trash till the bins are full.
We sweep the floors, and what the heck?
We even clean the poop deck.
Clean ship, we all love a clean ship, sailing through the sea.
We wash the sails.
We wax the hull.
We pick up trash till the bins are full.
We sweep the floors, and what the
We
heck?
even clean the poop deck.
Clean ship, we all love a clean ship, sailing through the sea.
Hand me the mop.
You would never know it by looking at them, but Bob's crew loved cleanliness. Sure, the clothes they wore had holes and stains all over them, and they liked to keep a thin layer of dirt on their face and arms. But that's just part of being a pirate. Each and every one of them, from Colossus Klaus to Canio Pedro, worked hard to keep their own space spotless, and would even sneak cleaning in between adventures to try and maintain the ship. Bob was shocked by how quickly his crew got to work. Before he could even walk from the bow to the port, the crew was pushing mops, taking down the sails to be ironed, sorting through the trash barrels, and cleaning out the cannons.
Okay.
Bob wasn't sure how to best help,
What to do?
so he did what most people in charge do. He walked around looking busy.
All right, looking good. Yep, here we go. Busy work. Good job, everybody.
Zoe was giddy seeing all of it done and expected the crew to finish by lunchtime. It seemed like every minute she was able to check something off her list. Keep up the pace, she shouted. Make it look better than new.
You got it, Zoe.
One of the interesting things about getting involved in a task, even something as boring as sorting trash between a compost barrel and a trash barrel, is how it can take over your entire attention.
Clean ship, we all love a clean ship.
The crew had a lot of work to do. It took them multiple hours to finish everything, but it didn't feel like that. To them, it felt like time itself was no longer relevant, like there was only a present tense and everything they did fell into it. Even Bob felt this as he hobbled back and forth, managing things.
Very good. Looking clean.
They were so wrapped up in the work, they couldn't really observe anything else happening around them. This is important to know, because it explains how nobody on the crew noticed the sudden drop in sunshine or narrowing quiet around them. They didn't notice the new tension in the air and the chill that passed over the waters. They were too busy trying to figure out how to get the last wrinkles smoothed on the sail or the best way to clean the soot out of the inside of a cannon to notice that their little pirate ship had suddenly found itself between two giant warships. Pirates weren't the only ones with cannons and gunpowder that inhabited the waters. Countries from far and wide put their warships out to sea to make sure the other countries knew who was better. Most of the time, these ships avoided getting into conflicts and just sailed past in the distance. But on occasion, they met each other in the open waters and threatened to start a war. Although pirate ships and warships have a few similarities, they are both ships that have sails and cannons and a crew that lives on them. They are definitely not the same. For one, warships were anywhere from 5 to 10 times bigger than pirate ships. They had a lot more cannons. And everyone on the warship dressed nice and never laughed. Everything to them was serious business. So there was no singing, or spitting on the deck, or talk of pirates. Just polite conversations about logistics and tactics. And how the country they came from is better than the other countries they may end up fighting. In other words, warships were giant and boring. Pirate ships, on the other hand, were small and agile and anything but boring. Pirate captains knew that in the open waters, at cannon distance, a pirate ship was no match for a warship. So they made sure, if they ever had to attack a warship, or at least try and steal the golden watches of the captains, they would sneak up beside the ship without being seen. As Bob the Bad Pirate's ship floated between the two warships, neither of the ships noticed. The captains of each ship were politely sending messages back and forth, describing the amount of cannons they had,
75, no, 77.
and how their king or queen had declared this and that,
Rightfully ours.
and how certain parts of the water somehow belonged to different countries on the other side of the world.
No, that is hard.
And the crews were too busy preparing for battle and not singing to look down at the water.
Clean ship, we all love a clean ship.
Bob's crew was just finishing up with the last bit of polishing the deck when Bob the Bad Pirate stood at the helm and declared that it was time for a captain's inspection.
Arg me, matey.
Yarr, Bobby!
You've cleaned this ship like you clean your own nostrils.
Right!
And although I know we would all rather be out looking for treasure, I'm grateful for the work.
Zoe, standing beside him, was very happy and couldn't believe how much better it felt to be on the ship. A good deep cleaning has the power of making something old and familiar feel like a brand new present, and every one of the crew members felt like they had just opened a toy.
Let's start with the barrels.
Bob and Zoe walked slowly as they examined each barrel. The first barrels were for compost, the second group for reuse, and the third group was for trash to be burned. As Bob peered into one of the reuse barrels, he spotted an old monocle that used to belong to One-Eyed Winslow.
I've always wanted one of these.
Bob said excited before putting the monocle over one eye. Everyone agreed that the monocle made Bob look more refined.
What a look!
There was a shout from the back of the ship asking if that was Bob the Professor, which made Bob feel all warm and tingly. Unfortunately, the monocle also made it incredibly difficult for Bob to actually see. But he loved the compliments he was getting, so he couldn't bear to take it off. Next, Bob and Zoe inspected the cannons. Each one of them was sparkling like new. The inside of each barrel brushed and the cannonballs and gunpowder stored neatly and securely beside them. Bob didn't like the cannons and hoped they wouldn't really need to use them. But he couldn't let the rest of his crew know how he felt about cannons.
Arg! These cannons are shinier than Spanish silver at the bottom of the sea. Let's load them up just in case.
Bob said, feeling a little wobbly from the monocle. The crew started putting gunpowder and a cannonball in each cannon. Zoe came up beside Bob and said very softly, "Don't worry, I'll come up with an excuse not to test them later. I know you don't like cannons." Bob tried to give Zoe a grateful nod, but he was so dizzy from the monocle that it looked more like a confused head shake. Polly the pigeon flew off Bob's shoulder and began pecking the top of one of the cannons, hoping it was a giant sunflower seed. Before Zoe could ask him why he looked so confused, Bob stepped forward and declared,
Now to inspect the deck.
in reality, the deck of the ship was pristine. The crew in charge of cleaning it worked hard to get out every spot, smooth the wood, and polish it just enough to shine without it being slippery. But because of the monocle, and the fact that they were at this point floating slowly between two giant warships that were blocking the sun, Bob was having a hard time seeing the perfection of their work.
It must be later than I thought. Please get me a torch so I can see the old deck.
Bob shouted toward his crew. Within a moment, Silver-Eyed Sylvia produced a torch and handed it to Bob the Bad Pirate. While Bob began examining the deck, Zoe started to feel strange. It was that feeling some people have when their body senses danger before their minds can make sense of anything. Zoe, being a good pirate, had learned to pay attention whenever the feeling occurred, and was about to look around when she heard Bob shout,
We must add some polish for this deck to really shine.
Zoe walked over to examine the deck herself and tried to pull Bob aside to tell him that she didn't think it needed more polish, just that it was too dark to really tell. But it was too late. The crew was already slathering on more polish, and Bob was singing,
A shiny ship, sailing around on a shiny ship. A shiny ship.
It wasn't a very good song, but that didn't stop Bob from singing it with delight. Once the deck had been overpolished, Bob declared,
Arg! Prepare the sails for inspection, so we can be on our way to more exciting adventures.
What happened next happened very quickly, but it's better to describe it as if it happened in slow motion. The feeling of danger was growing bigger for Zoe, and she began looking around for what it could be. At first, she looked to her crew to see if anything was wrong there, and then to the ship to see if anything was on fire or leaking. Finally, she began looking up and realized where the feeling was coming from. As she peered up towards the sky, She realized the ship was floating between what looked like cliffs at first, perfectly symmetrical and only about 100 feet distance away on each side. As she looked closer, she began noticing things that looked like small circular windows, and high above the cliff, she saw what looked like cloth drapes. It was at that moment that the feeling of danger caught up with her understanding of danger, and she knew that they had meandered into a very bad situation. While all this was happening with Zoe, Bob was waving his torch around, trying to see better in the dark, while he still struggled to focus on anything through the monocle he didn't want to take off. The crew had the sails prepped to be lifted and were just waiting on the order from Bob. When Bob gave the signal to lift the freshly pressed sails, Zoe shouted, "Warships! Between 2 warships!" There was a second when every pirate on the ship processed what was happening and began shifting from the excitement of a freshly cleaned ship to the fear of floating between ships that could blow their ship out of the water and into Davy Jones' locker. But the time for processing was short-lived. When the sails went up, the ship jerked forward from the wind. Bob the Bad Pirate, who was already a bit wobbly from the monocle, slid backwards. The ship he made the crew over-polish felt more like a skating rink than a ship deck, and Bob just kept sliding. The torch at his side rushed along the row of cannons, lighting each of the fuses. When Bob finally slid to the stern, he fell into the barrels of trash, lighting them on fire before they all fell into the water beneath him. Bob looked up toward Zoe, who had taken the helm to steer their ship to safety. The crew was scrambling to get to their stations, kept slipping on the over-polished deck. Bob's ship was just about to pass through the 2 warships and into the open waters when the first cannon, then the second, the third, and the rest all fired cannonballs into the hull of one of the warships. This got everyone's attention, including the sailors working atop each of the warships. Even Zoe froze with the shock for a moment. The captains of the warships were stunned and ran to the side of the ship to assess the damage and prepare to respond to the other for engaging in battle. Bob's ship was moving fast from the draft of wind, accelerating between the 2 ships. Just before the crews of each warship looked over the side, Bob the Bad Pirate's ship flew out from between the 2 ships into the open waters and sailed quickly away. The only thing visible to the warship captains by the time they were looking over the side of their mighty ships were the holes left from the cannons in one of the ships and burning barrels floating toward the other ship. The captain of the warship that had been hit by the cannons shouted to the other captain, "I do declare, you hath engaged in a conflict with the cannons in which you will not survive." The other captain yelled back, "Nay, it isn't so. You have sabotaged yourself and then sent barrel bombs toward our hold to burn us out. A cruel and cowardly attack." Behind all the strong and formal accusations, the captains were deeply confused and terrified, and after their initial engagement, the only thing they could think to say back and forth to each other was, "Did not," and "Did to." After about a minute of blame, every second filled with more confusion, fear, and anger, the captains looked at their crews and declared loud enough for the other ship, "Then prepare for war!" By the time the ships started firing on each other, Bob and his crew were a safe distance away. Zoe asked Colossus Klaus to take the wheel so she could go to the stern and talk with Bob. He was still leaning in shock along the railing of the stern, watching as each ship fired on the other. It looked and sounded almost like fireworks from where they were.
"Arg, Zoe,"
Bob said as he noticed her beside him.
"I do believe we may have accidentally started a war."
Zoe watched the ships at war, getting smaller and smaller as their own ships sailed further away. The sun by now was beginning to set, and each cannon blast lit up the smoke surrounding the warships like a distant thunderstorm. They looked to Zoe like fireflies in the fog. "Bob, we didn't start a war. That war started a long time ago, when someone in some castle in some country far away from here decided they could do something so foolish as own the sea. Bob looked at Zoe.
A truer thing has never been spoke.
Zoe began to smile. It was amazing that in the midst of all of it, you somehow managed to light the fuse on all of the cannons. Bob the bad pirate laughed a little. Then Zoe laughed. Before they knew it, they were laughing hard. And the laughter spread through the crew until every pirate on the ship was laughing with happy tears. At least we don't need to test the cannons, one shouted, which made the crew laugh even more.
That's the most efficient way of taking out the trash I've ever seen.
Another shouted, bringing the crew to the point of tearful laughing. Bob, proud of his crew and his first mate, and happy to be laughing, stood up and began walking back toward the helm. In the midst of all the chaos, Bob still somehow hung on to the monocle. But when Polly the pigeon landed on his shoulder and started to peck at it, he decided maybe it wasn't worth looking so cool. So he gave it to Polly the pigeon as a prize. The natural laughter was starting to wane, and the crew was glancing around at each other with that deep, contented connectedness that happens after a good, deep laugh. Bob stopped at the crow's nest to address his fearless band of buccaneers.
The ship, me mateys, looks better than it ever has. 'Twas a great day of cleaning. I appreciate the work.
Bob paused as a smile creeped up his lips.
We may, however, have over-polished the deck.
There was a second pause, and then the whole crew burst out laughing again, crying and hugging each other, and relieved that they had each other and the open and free sea, and the winds at their sail, and the worries of the bigger world far behind them in a cloak of smoke, fire, and cannons. Later that night, as each of them fell asleep, a smile curled onto their faces as they remembered Bob the bad pirate sliding across the ship, lighting each cannon on accident, and dropping his torch on the trash bins as they flew into the sea. The night itself seemed to smile as the crew floated beneath its lighted gaze, onward toward another adventure. Hi, Mabel.
Hi.
What is your favorite part of the episode?
I think when they start the war,
You like it when they start the war?
it's just cool.
It's just cool. It's great. Yeah, it is cool the way the whole thing happens.
Yeah.
Have you ever accidentally spilled something or done something that turned out to be a little worse than what you expected it to be?
Like, I've spilled things a lot.
Yeah, but that's okay, right? Sometimes accidents happen. Hey, Mabel, would you like to read the Lightcatchers credits?
Sure, I'll try. Lightcatchers is created, written, and narrated by Cody, a.k.a. CC Kimball. Sound design and mixing by Jonathan Roberts. Podcast produced by Dan Gummer. Wait,
And-
what? Dan
Gummel. Just
Gummel?
perfect.
In partnership with Gray Space and Gum Audio. Music written by Cody Kimmel, produced by Hannah Glaver, and mixed and mastered by Reese Sacker. To support this ad-free podcast, download free coloring pages and subscribe to the Lightcatchers magazine. Go to bealightcatcher.com.
Woohoo! Way to go, Mabel. You did it. Thanks so much, Mabel.
You're welcome. Bye.